Welcome to the War Studies podcast. We bring you world-leading research from the School of Security Studies at King's College London, the largest community of scholars in the world dedicated to the study of all aspects of security, defence, and international relations. We explore the complex realm of conflict because the study of war is fundamental to understanding the world we live in and the world we want to live in.
Well, welcome to the War Studies podcast, and I'm Geoff Browell. I'm the head of Heritage Collections at King's College London's Libraries and Collections Department. That contains a wealth of material relating to the history of war and conflict, books, grey literature, original archive material, photographs spanning more than 200 years, including D-Day and the Second World War, which is what we're talking about today. And I'm introducing Professor Andrew Lambert, Laughton Professor of Naval History here at King's College London, whose most recent book. Well, would you like to tell us, Andrew, what your most recent book is?
Thank you, Geoff. Yeah, the new book is called No More Napoleons, and essentially it's looking at the 19th century from the high watermark of Napoleon's empire to the outbreak of the First World War, and tracing how British security policy was shaped by maritime naval power, by its global resource base, and the fact that it created and sustained the world's greatest navy, and then it decided to fight the First World War with a small professional army, which led to all kinds of problems, which had been fully anticipated by, of all people, the Duke of Wellington.
Thank you. Well, today we're joined by Angus, and you're going to introduce yourself, Angus. And this is in celebration of an exhibition which we have running currently at the Exchange at Bush House at King's College London, and it runs until the 3rd of September. So you've got a little bit of time, perhaps, to come along and view the exhibition, and it's called Lost and Found in Hong Kong, The Unsung Chinese Heroes at D-Day. So it's an extraordinary tale of discovery, of lost documents, and of putting together a fantastic exhibition which describes a little-known episode, one should say, of the Second World War and of D-Day, the naval history of the Second World War, and that's the Chinese involvement in D-Day. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Angus if you'd like to introduce yourself and the team that you represent.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Geoff. So, hello, I'm Angus. I'm one of the creators and the researchers of this project, Lost and Found in Hong Kong, the Unsung Chinese Heroes at D-Day. So, this project is about, as Geoff has mentioned, a very need-to-know episode in World War II history. So, it's basically about a group of 24 Chinese naval officers being selected and dispatched to Britain to get some naval trainings during the Second World War. So they arrived in the Royal Naval College at Greenwich in 1943, and their first mission, after months of trainings, turned out to be the D-Day landings and subsequently other military operations in the liberation of France.
Thank you. And would you like to introduce your team?
So together with us, we have joined and other creators, and also the team, we call it the D-Day Hong Kong team, is formed by a group of Hong Kong youth. We come from different backgrounds, but we have found resonance in these stories, especially about these officers' life journeys and their life choices. So starting from last year, we came together, we start research and the creation of the exhibition. So right now, after a year and a half, we have around like 50 volunteers, young volunteers. They come from Hong Kong, Britain, and France. And this year, we are planning not just a local tour in Hong Kong, but also an international tour in both the UK and France. We're trying to bring the story to light to a wider global audience, together with the help of all our amazing team members and volunteers.
I was interested, just from a technical point of view, this exhibition is very based around a diary that was discovered, which we can talk about in a little bit. Is this a small segment of a much longer diary that he has compiled?
So we need to go back to the discovery of all the things. So basically, the story began 10 years ago in Hong Kong in 2015. there was a tenement building, an old building in Hong Kong that was set for demolition. So just right before the building was going to be pulled down, some history enthusiasts, together with photographers, they just discovered that in one apartment there was, musings, family letters, a Japanese naval sword, military jackets, naval buttons, ROC, naval officers' uniform buttons, together with a diary. So it was just part of the diarist's writing. So he wrote his things, he recorded his things starting from the 1930s, the early 1930s. He was born in 1911, and the earliest writing that we could find was in 1931, so when he was 20 years old. So he recorded his life, his emotions, starting from the 1930s, and then his training, especially his wartime experience in the liberation of France in the 40s, with a whole diary starting from May 1944 to mostly November 1944, the same year. So it's basically his experience in the UK, in D-Day landings, and the subsequent invasion of southern France, Operation Dragoon. And then there are also family letters that was written by him to his younger brothers in Hong Kong, when he was in his old age, in his 80s. So the story is that when he decided, after the Civil War, when he decided to came to Hong Kong, he retired from the Navy and he worked as a merchant sea captain in Hong Kong for 30 odd years, but he didn't really stay in Hong Kong for the rest of his life. Starting from the 1970s, he moved to Italy, Brazil, and then eventually in the United States. So we also found writings of him in Brazil, sending from Brazil, Sao Paulo, to his brother in Hong Kong in the 1990s when he was in his 80s. So it was a huge volume of his writing, but the diary was just part of his written manuscript, so to speak.
When would the diary have been written? So this is a question that we often face in the archive world and in authenticating documents, for example. And we get asked the question, when was it written exactly? Was it written after the event?
For the diary, the cover page was written Diary 1944. We are not too sure what time he wrote the diary, but we try our very best to verify what he described, whether it's accurate, and we try to verify his presence on board. So again, with the ship logs, we are able to verify his presence, and he wrote in his diary that he served on board on the 29th of May 1944. And we checked the ship logs of the day from the HMS Remy's record. Indeed, he was assigned to serve on board on the day. And also he mentioned he met others, including Russian naval officers. And we were also able to trace that Russian officers on ship logs. So we tried our best to verify everything he said on the diary. But as to when he wrote the diary, we are not 100% sure. But I suspect, or our guessing would be, he wrote it just right after the mission, or just right after that day.
I think you've got the archivists engaged in this project very much. I think that sounds like a terrific resource. My first question, Angus, is why is China sending so many young men around the world in the middle of a war? There's a major war going on in China. It's obviously a very major one going on in Europe and elsewhere as well. So why are these men being sent, and do we know how they were chosen?
So maybe we need to begin with what happened in the mid 19th century, because at the time, the Chinese government at the time, the Qing government, had already had a naval collaborations with the Royal Navy, and even after the fall of the Qing government, the monarchy. The Republican government, they had also established a long-standing naval collaborations with the British government. And I guess in 1929, they have signed agreement, and then they have, especially the Republican government, has sent some batches of Chinese naval talents to the Royal Naval College for training. But it stopped in around 1937 when the Second Sino-Japanese War broke out. And at the time, since we know that the Japanese Navy was much greater and much powerful than the Chinese Navy. So the Chinese Navy, at the very first beginning in the Second Sino-Japanese War, they chose the sort of suicidal tactics to sort of slow down the advance of the Japanese Navy. One of the tactics was to try to scuttle the naval vessels into the river, but it failed. And after years of battles, especially in the early 1940s, the Chinese Navy was nearly non-existent because at the time it was nearly diminished and destroyed. And that's why, given a turning point, uh, that was the Pearl Harbor attack in December 1941, the US, Britain, and China formally became allies. And Chiang Kai shek saw this as a good opportunity to rebuild the Chinese Navy. And that's why, just around 2 months after the Pearl Harbor attack, Chiang Kai shek sent requests to both the American and British government asking for the possibility of setting up an overseas training scheme to um, both countries respectively. Is about sending around like 50 Chinese naval officers to each of the country for training. Both countries agree in 1942. So at the moment, at the same year, around like 400 Chinese officers. They are from different backgrounds. They are from different provinces. They all went to the China's wartime capital, Chongqing, for a massive selection. According to what we have found in Taiwan in their archives, they need to went through various multiple rounds of examinations, vetting, including written examinations and oral interviews conducted in English. So after all these rounds of examinations, out of 400 officers, 74 of them were chosen. 50 were assigned to the United States and 24 were assigned to Britain. So these 24 men was the first batch of Chinese naval officers sent to Britain for training since the outbreak of the Second World War.
This is a really big project. So we're looking at enough officers to run a small navy. Looking at them all having good English language skills.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been part of their education going forward. They didn't learn this the night before. So English language skills being developed. And of course, that shift in the war from it being essentially a war between China and Japan to now being a trans-Pacific war involving
exactly.
the United States opens that opportunity. And we're looking here at the potential to create, when the war is over, and China was fully expecting to be on the winning side, a new navy which is going to go forward. Obviously, those plans get interrupted by other events. This is a very serious project. It's not a random action. This is forward thinking, it's long term thinking. And I think that's what's so impressive about this. You have a major war raging across your country, the casualties are very large.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there is still a concentration on the next stage. What happens when we've finished with this? What kind of navy was China hoping to build? Was there a plan to build a new navy when the war was over?
Well, according to the documents that we found in Kew Garden in the National Archives, one of the documents sort of outlined the blueprint of Chiang Kai-shek naval reconstruction. So he was aiming to build a Chinese navy that was small but efficient. So this is the vision that he planned after the war. But obviously, that navy must be completely under his control because, as we know, right before the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War, actually China, especially Chinese Navy, was suffering from factionalisms. There were different factions, and Chiang Kai-shek couldn't really control or command all the factions and to make it run as one. And that's why the war destroyed the navy, but also has given him an opportunity to rebuild a navy that was completely under his command. So he was aiming to build an efficient navy, but small in size, but this one need to be completely under his command.
I think that, and again, that's important for regime stability. What this sounds like to me is, of course, what the Japanese were doing in the late 19th century. They came to Britain, and their officers came to train in Britain, and they created a navy that was very successful in the war against Russia. So there's a transition going on here, and there are other navies in South America, other parts of the world that are looking to the British. But of course, by this period, the United States is equally a very great naval power. It's a little easier to get students, I guess, to America, hence the 50 numbers. With these men who came to Britain, how many have you been able to track down their materials, the evidence of their service?
At the moment, we're able to discover all 24 men's personnel found in Taiwan. So we have a brief understanding of their background, where they born, when did they join the Chinese Navy, and which factions or which academy that they belong to in China. If we need to dig into their stories deeper, for example, about their life in Britain. Right now, with the help of the ship logs that was also in the National Archives, we are able to identify around 16 out of 24 officers about their first sea training, and especially about the vessel that they were serving on for their first sea training in 1944. And right now we are able to locate around 8 vessels that they were serving during the liberation of France. So that is what we have been able to confirm at the moment. And also through their personnel file, this is a pretty important, but is a very enormous life choices that have made. Through their personnel file, we're able to know around 20 of them which sides they chose after the war, after the Chinese Civil War. So how many of them went to Taiwan, how many of them stayed in mainland, and how many of them came to Hong Kong? We have a brief sense of their choices.
So we're looking here at a navy which is being built for the nation, but that nation is torn apart by the Civil War after
Yeah,
the war in Asia is finished. And these men are then left in a position where they have to make decisions.
yeah,
They're not obeying orders here. They're following their own judgment.
yes.
So the men who decide to go with the nationalists, the men who decide to stay with the communists on the mainland, they're making their own decisions. How do military forces function when you have civil war? How do you choose sides? Why do people choose sides? Is it because they have a local connection that draws them to this side?
There are various reasons. I guess ideology was one of the reasons, but according to what we have conducted, especially we have conducted some oral interviews in both mainland China and Taiwan. We try to speak to some of their direct descendants or friends. We know that apart from ideology, family consideration, family concern was also one of the biggest reasons. For example, one of the officers, he decided to stay in mainland China was that because considering that their parents were too old and they couldn't really have the ability to travel to Taiwan. So it's one of the reasons why he chose to stay in mainland China afterward.
These are very much personal decisions. That's terrific. It's rare that we get that kind of granular detail of how relatively low-ranking personnel are making decisions,
Yeah,
because the Civil War has created a space in which they have to take the initiative. In most navies, most of the time, you join, you progress through the ranks, and you retire.
yeah,
You don't have to make a choice whether to be in this navy or that navy, but
yeah,
they had a choice. And we know from other civil wars that it can be it can be a very difficult choice.
yeah,
In the American Civil War, a lot of people chose their loyalty on the basis of where they came from and who their families were. They haven't quite managed to make them all into homogenous Americans. They're still seeing the world through their different state loyalties.
mhm,
And here we're looking at, again, some local issues. I think that's terrific. And of course, the revolution, the Civil War, and the establishment of the New People's Republic, the Navy isn't anywhere near as important as it might have been if the nationalists had stayed in power. It takes some time for China, the mainland China, to become a naval power. So, do many of these men who stay with the mainland, do they
Mm.
have significant careers?
Well, some of them they did. Actually, for those who make either the decision of leaving mainland China to Taiwan or stayed in mainland China, um, some of them they rose up the ranks in the Navy. For example, one of the officers who decided to move to Taiwan, he later on became the commander in chief of the Navy in Taiwan. Another one that also went to Taiwan because of their excellent English proficiency. He became Chiang Kai shek interpreter in the 70s. For those who stayed in mainland China, they all became the PLA Navy founding members, and one of them, they even become the CPPCC National Community member in the 80s. So it's sort of like a senior political figures in Chinese politics. So, well, I mean, for both sides, some of them they did well and in their career, and they achieved some brilliant results in their career.
That's terrific. Because I think having this small study, these we've got 24 individuals, and to be able to trace all of them, normally that doesn't happen. You only have so much archival access. I think
Yeah,
this is such a rich project, and it doesn't leave you with those what ifs. And but let's go back to D-Day. What are these guys doing on D-Day? Because we know what D-Day looks like, but it's the biggest maritime campaign of the Second World War, and it essentially lasts 6 months
yeah,
from the build up, the landing, and then the delivery of troops and stores across the beach. It goes on well into the autumn. So,
yeah,
what are they doing, and what are they going to take away from this? And the other question that I have to ask to fit in with that, they all served and came out the other end alive, no
yeah.
casualties. That again, this is a very dangerous place to be anywhere near D-Day. So, what were they doing on the day, and indeed around the whole D-Day campaign? And what kind of experiences did they have? Because I'm sure there's some terrific stories there.
Yeah. So I guess the question I can answer it in two parts. So first, the first answer would be what sort of vessels they served during D-Day. So they were assigned to different vessels in pairs. Some of them they serve on battleships, like our diarist, he served on HMS Ramillies and Old Dreadnought. Some of them they serve on escort carriers and cruisers. Their duties were different. For example, like our diarist, as he served on Ramleys, he appeared in the waters off the waters of Sword Beach on 6th of June, providing fire support for the landing forces in Sword Beach by bombing the German batteries. And we also knew that there are another two officers serving on HMS Warspite. Their duties were similar. Also, for others who serve on escort carriers and cruisers, their duties was about carrying out anti-submarine patrol along the English Channel, alongside taking part in some deception plan in Europe. But for that particular role on ship on board, as far as we know, they were observers. Observers. We are not too sure what particular role they really had or they have been assigned, but we know their title was observer. However, according to our oral interviews, especially with experts in HMS Ramleys, well, he shared that it's impossible for a person at D-Day with no assignments or with no mission. It's just observing. So it would be impossible. But as to their particular role, we are still trying to figure out. But given that as their observer, and that's why they have some opportunity to observe the ship, and that's why one of the reason why this diary was so special, written by our diarist, was that he observed a lot and he tried to write down what he witnessed during D-Day, including 3 torpedoes attacked by the Germans, and also even what he ate at D-Day. Like he shared, they had tinned beef, they had bread, they had sausage, and even first afternoon tea was included at D-Day. And he also tried to present D-Day and the military operation in a sort of like a Chinese way. For example, he described the bombings or the air raids as Chinese lanterns. I think the role of observers, give him that freedom to write the D-Day in such a details.
What we got here is somebody who's in a position on a very large warship and can actually see what's happening.
Yeah,
So most people on a battleship are going to be very much inside the ship, where it's much safer behind armor plate, in the engine room, in the gun turrets. You can't see
yeah,
anything from there, but this man is clearly in a position where he can see.
exactly, exactly.
The torpedo attack, uh, had those torpedoes hit the Ramillies, it would have sunk. And
Yeah,
Warspite was attacked as well. So these men were in real danger.
yeah,
Naval
exactly.
casualties were not insignificant.
Hmm.
The people who were involved in getting their troops on the beach, again, casualties. So
Yeah,
it's a big, complex, dangerous operation. You don't take any passengers when you're waging war at this level. So they might
exactly.
have been observing, but I suspect that they had a job to do as well.
I'm pretty sure about that as well.
Yeah, I think that that's a great story. That here we are on the other side of the world, and these men are making a contribution to the Allied victory that is going
Hmm.
to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
liberate their homeland. And they couldn't be further from home. And they're having to put up with what the English think tea is. So I think that's a terrific story. That international element is something fascinating because different countries view the sea in different ways.
hmm,
Um, the English historically are very happy to be at sea. Some other countries are really quite nervous. And this evolution from being at D-Day on a battleship to being a merchant ship captain and moving around the world, both professionally but also personally,
yeah.
and becoming part of a floating world which is able to access different parts of the world. So, do you get a sense in this diary that a real transfer of culture going on here? That the culture of the Royal Navy, which is very long established, is beginning to impact on these men as they're going through their training, as they're going through active service. They're seeing how this organisation does Navy, which is different to every other navy, and it still
Hmm.
is. Navies are unlike armies, which tend to always be the same, just where
Yeah.
you have a different flag. Navies tend to reflect their countries rather more. So, being a Chinese naval officer serving in a British warship in
Hmm.
wartime, that's a very particular kind of experience. So, does he notice just how different the British are?
I mean, especially for the diarist, he has great admiration for the Royal Navy because I can share one more story, a very interesting story. So he was assigned to Greenwich in 1943, but 7 years before he was sent to Greenwich, well, he actually put forward his name to Chiang Kai-shek and asked for an opportunity to train in Britain. So he waited for that opportunity for many years, and his dream came true in 1943. So he made use of every opportunities, every moment to study and to observe what he had learned from the Royal Navy. And one part that he mentioned was that after D-Day, he just saw how meticulous the Royal Navy was, especially in artillery and in sort of bombings. And he wrote that, oh, it's completely different from what we have learned in China because we just learned it on textbook. We didn't really have the opportunity to make it and to put it into practice, and that's why he was so amazed, and he admired the calmness, the meticulous way the Royal Navy was doing during military operations.
I can think of some of those things that would have had that effect. So we're looking at somebody coming through a naval training, a naval career, and
Mhm.
then finding that there's another level beyond where the navy they've saved in before. One of the things that always strikes me when I'm ever at sea with the Royal Navy is
Mhm.
nobody needs to raise their voice. Everybody knows what they're doing. You don't have to order sailors to do their work. They know what their work is, and they will do it without being told. Um,
Exactly.
as a son of the Navy, I grew up with these things. It was assumed that you knew what you were doing, and you asked for help only when necessary. So there's a cultural exchange going on here. This is something that other navies sent people to train with the Royal Navy discovered quite quickly. Early 20th century Japanese Navy followed the British practice very, very closely. They changed the uniform just a little to put Japanese insignia on them, and they bought their ships in Britain as well. And I'm sure the British were thinking, right, a friendly Chinese Navy buying ships in British shipyards, that's going to be really good. We'll have friends in the Far East. We'll have business deals going on. This is going to turn out to be a really good investment, training these guys.
Yeah. And Andrew, speaking of cultural exchange, I have another small story, a new discovery that we have found last month when we were in London. So after the launch of our KCL exhibition, we made a trip to the National Archives. And we just found out that just right after their missions in the liberation of France, they returned to Britain in late 1944. And their next mission was to go to Portsmouth for advanced courses. But just right before they arrive in Portsmouth, well, they make a trip. They make a trip to Shakespeare's residence and to Birmingham, and who invite them? The British Council. The British Council just invite them to make a visit, a 3 days visit to Shakespeare residence in Stratford and to Birmingham. And it was all written in the yearbook of the British Council. So it is another perfect example of cultural exchange.
When you read Shakespeare, and you realize that he's operating in a playhouse right next to the River Thames. Half his audience are sailors or people who work in the maritime trades, and the sea is on every page. You can't get very far into Shakespeare before the sea crops up, and his last play is very much centered around the sea. This sense of cultural movement and how British culture is different. Yes, Stratford-on-Avon couldn't be further from the sea, but it is the home place of this man who writes so wonderfully about the sea. So all the British write about the sea because it's a very small island. And Shakespeare is just as much part of British identity as the Royal Navy and all of these other things. So the British are not selling a training program, they're selling a culture program, which is wrapped around the training. So if you do your work like Royal Navy sailors, you start to pick up some of those other Royal Navy things. And that's how you build relationships. Had history turned out differently, Anglo-Chinese relations in the 50s, 60s, and 70s would have been a wonderful opportunity for these men to continue that connection. Going on to you mentioned the Operation Dragoon. Everybody forgets this. There's a very large invasion of southern France, and a lot of the ships, particularly the landing ships and some of the big ships from D-Day, swing down into the Mediterranean and get involved in another very big operation, again with gun battles with shore batteries. Ramillies is certainly there. But these big ships, these are 25, 30,000 ton battleships, and they're moving around the world, and their job is not to fight other battleships, because that's over. Their job is to open the way for troops to land. So the Navy provides the heavy artillery, it provides all the logistics, it delivers the troops to the battlefield. All they have to do is fight, which is really very easy stuff.
I mean, but according to the diarists and also other accounts from these officers who took part in the Operation Dragoon, it seems that they really believe that the Operation Dragoon is way easier than the D-Day landings. Around a week after the operation, starting from the 15th of August 1944, well, they had time of having some quality times of enjoying sunshine and beaches in Corsica. So there was picture of them enjoying their time in Corsica, and even the diarist said that a lot of people they went hiking and swimming in Corsica, and he said, "Oh, this one is way easier. It seems like it's a smooth one."
Well, every sailor likes to run ashore, and after a dangerous voyage, there's nothing better than a few drinks and a bit of relaxation. It's a classic part of maritime culture.
Yeah.
Sailors have always been rather independent-spirited people.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of regimes historically have had trouble with sailors because they don't understand the free will of the seafaring population and their willingness to simply leave if you don't treat them well and go and find another job somewhere else. It doesn't apply to navies, but certainly does to merchant sailors. If you offer them more pay and a better job, they will go. They're an international commodity. They're not a national resource which can be controlled.
Can I interject there just a second about the exhibition itself? I suppose, did you have to do a lot of additional research? It sounds like you did. You must have taken a lot of
Yeah, we
oral
did.
histories of sons, daughters, grandchildren, perhaps. Were there
Yeah.
any surviving members of this group of individuals when you started your research?
So unfortunately, when we start the research, I guess all 24 men have passed away. But this year, and especially last year, we're able to locate and be connect with three of the descendants of these officers. For the officers, they made different life choices. We have included descendants of the officers that made their choices of moving to Taiwan, staying in mainland China, and coming to Hong Kong. Uh, they share different perspective of their father stories, but one of the most fascinating part of the whole research that I would love to share was that I've mentioned the diary was discovered in 2015. So before the launch of our exhibition last year, um, several individuals have tried their efforts to locate the family members of the diaries, but to no success. But just right after the launch of our Hong Kong exhibition, um, the children of the diarists were able to find them and were able to connect with them. So they're staying in the Americas. Their father, the diarist, rarely spoke about his naval careers and his wartime experience. So for the children of the diarist, it was the first time for them to truly understand what his father went through in the 30s, in the 40s, especially in the chaotic World War II. So we present him with a greater and a more comprehensive understanding of his father, about his frustration, about his idealisms, about his dedication, and about his life choices. So I guess when we talk about the power of history, I really sense the power of history, the significance of history to a person and to a family. Just despite the fact that the diarist has already passed away for 25 years, he passed away in 2000. The children, especially the daughter of the diarist, told us that she understands more about her father, his idealisms, and as an idealistic young man. And you can really sense how history foster the father and daughter relationships. And it was one of the amazing takeaways from this research journey, as Geoff, you have asked me, and I just this story just popped up in my mind.
It sounds like you're really just scratching the surface in a way. Do you think there's a lot more to be discovered? Are you getting the sense that there are other diaries out there, that there's more material out there?
I'm pretty sure there are, and it's just part of the overseas training schemes, because I guess there are way more things to do. As I've mentioned, actually there are another 50 officers that were assigned to the US. So what happened to them, and what are their life choices? What did they make after the Chinese Civil War, and how it affected their lives? I mean, only these 74 men, we required way extra, more extra research efforts and try to piece together the human stories. And I guess, and hopefully, I genuinely hope that there will be another diary that could provide another perspective of the D-Day landings or their life in Greenwich. I mean, there was a possibility, but it requires our hard work, so to speak.
Is
It
that what
requires
you're
our hard work.
intending to do? Is that the next step?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the research will carry on even we have launched the exhibition, because just because of the exhibition, we're able to know more people that had knowledge about their journey, these 24 men journey. So I guess it's just a beginning. I mean, there are a lot of archival work to do, a lot of oral interviews to do, and right now, just within a few months, we're able to be in talks with more descendants or more friends or former colleagues of these men. So I guess it takes at least a few years to try to piece together the full picture. And for me, I hope the ultimate goal was to write a book. A publication would be the ultimate goal, just to try to keep the story forever and try to let others to read it when, I mean, the full story was pieced together.
It's a fantastic exhibition, and I mean, it must have been. Did it take a lot of work to put together? It must have done as a piece of curatorial work.
Thank you. That's too kind. I mean, I need to give the credits to all my team members because they have made a fabulous job in doing this project, and they have dedicated their time and efforts to the project, and that's why we couldn't have this success without their dedication.
I think going forward, navies have really good archives because they're very high spending departments. And in countries like Britain and the United States, the democratic political process means that you have to account for all the money and all the
Mhm,
people, because the people who've survived the war are entitled to things like pensions. Those that have lost their lives, there may be compensation for their next of kin as well.
mhm.
So these are bureaucratic organizations with a national remit to, to capture that information. And I would like to think that the United States archives would be
Mhm.
as accessible and as revealing about your 50-man cohort. We've got 74 outstanding young Chinese officers who volunteered for a program, who succeeded in getting through this challenging process
Mhm.
and meeting the standards and then being detached off to do this. So it's a very ambitious project, and it's staffed up by 74 very ambitious people who think they can do this and they want to do
Exactly.
this. They have a vision which is taking them off and around the world. And I grew up with these stories. My father served in the Royal Navy in the Korean War, so I grew up with being on the other side of the world, in countries where they didn't speak the language. His experiences were part of my growing up, and they almost certainly explain why I'm sitting here now talking about this. These men are very interesting because they have chosen to stand out from the crowd,
Yeah.
because they've had a remarkable experience, particularly the 24 on the British side that we know
Yeah.
about. And they tell us a great deal about how the sea is a unifying element.
Mm.
These are Chinese nationals. They're
Mhm.
commissioned in the Chinese Navy. They're serving on board a Royal Navy warship or so, uh,
Mhm.
in a war zone. Very dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever mentioned this, but it's a very dangerous place to be.
Exactly.
Iris mentions some torpedoes just missing the Ramillies. Quite a lot of ships got sunk off D-Day, and naval casualties were quite high.
Yeah.
So this is a dangerous place to be, and it's not your navy, and it's probably not even your war. I'm not sure if China declared war on Germany.
Exactly. So, Andrew, you made a very good point because when I was doing the research, I always imagined the way that they need to make to Chongqing for for the selection. I mean, at the time, Chongqing was under constant bombing by the Japanese. They need to make their way to the wartime capital to be selected, and then after they were selected, they need to make a 4 month voyage, a 4 month journey from Chongqing to Greenwich. They need to fly over the Himalayas to arrive in India, and then took them vessels sailing through Indian Oceans, Suez Canal, and then arrive in Egypt, and to sail through Mediterranean Sea in 943 again, through Gibraltar and arrive in Greenwich. So talking about dangers, you can imagine how much dangers they encounter and how much potential dangers they could have.
You have to admire their ambition, and that's what I'm admiring about this project as well. Not satisfied with the old answers, the standard answers, a little bit of information. You've really driven into this project and got control of all of the information. We now know so much more. And the point with the exhibition and in the future with publication, this will only bring out more information because once the story spreads, you will get new contributions. You will find new angles.
Thank
After when the Second World War ends, Britain does provide China with some warships.
you. Mhm.
before the Civil War is resolved.
Yeah.
So this program continues on after 1945, and then
Yes.
all of a sudden, big choices have to be made. There's a whole new settlement. And by 1950, 51, Britain and China are effectively, although not actually, at war.
Yeah.
They're certainly exchanging hostile
Yeah.
actions.
Exactly. You're
So
right.
that basis of this story then shifts very, very dramatically,
Mm-hmm.
and the world becomes a very different place.
Mm-hmm.
Just as the Cold War begins,
Yeah.
and we start to think about things other than navies, start to think about nuclear warfare.
I mean, it's absolutely right, because I guess these 24 men, why they're significant, because as Andrew has said, it's just the beginning of the wartime collaborations between Britain and China. And after that, there were another group of officers together with 1,000 of cadets. They traveled to Britain for training. Because of the war, because of various incidents took part and happened in China, that collaboration ceased, and they were at war again. So history and its life.
Thank you and all of your team. Everybody involved
Thank you,
has
Andrew.
made a
Thank you, Geoff.
tremendous difference. You've given these people their history back, and you've given us something to think about. We have to remember that an awful lot of people from an awful lot of countries are involved on D-Day,
Yeah.
and these 24 guys, they're there too. So this is a bit more United Nations than we'd even imagined.
100%. 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for a wonderful
Thank
exhibition
you.
and for all your hard work and the hard work of your team. And the exhibition
Thank you.
runs
Thank you.
until the 3rd of September at King's before it moves on. So there's just time, if you've seen this podcast in time, to visit the exhibition and to learn more about this amazing story.
Really terrific project, great exhibition. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you to both
Thank
of you
you.
again.
You've been listening to the War Studies podcast, produced and edited by the School of Security Studies Communications team. For more information on our work, visit our website, which you'll find in the podcast description. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate and review us on your preferred podcast provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the War Studies podcast.